All right, good evening, everyone. This is Bill's Big Events. It is February 28th, 2026. We've got just a few topics to cover today, but we're going to start with the biggest one. We are now at war with Iran. Go America first. I was all about MAGA until it turned into MIGA. Before we even get into the war, I think it's ridiculous how in the pocket of Israel and Judaism we are. We are funding Israel with about $3.5 to $4 billion a year every year until 2028 when the contract will be renegotiated. But it's 2030 when the contract is renegotiated. But there's a memorandum of understanding that's been renewed every decade since the 1970s. For some reason, well, I can tell you exactly why. Because the Schofield Study Bible and people like Ted Cruz who believe that we have to bless Israel in order to be blessed. Which is a false understanding. It's a misunderstanding of the Bible from a politician who's probably never gone to a real seminary. It's ridiculous how in the pocket of Israel we are. We provide them with military aid. We provide them with weapons. We do not need to be providing them with blood and sweat. But again, hopefully that'll be changing within the next 5 years. In addition to that $3.5 billion we've been sending them each year, we also, on our own soil in places like Kiryas Joel and Muncie, New York, we are providing $275,000 to the Shomrim for new radios. That is the Hasidic secret police that act in tandem with the local police and the state police of that area. They receive federal funding, which means people like you and I both pay for that. It's kind of a ridiculous amount of money. We have, drug addicts. We have people starving on the street. We have veterans. We have infrastructure issues. We have cyber infrastructure issues. We have millions of migrants in our borders. There is much better available spending for that money than to help a Jewish secret police organization in replacing their radios. We could be employing more ICE workers, more DHS workers in order to get these migrants out of here. We could be funding better police equipment in order to protect from the rioters in places like Minnesota, eventually Virginia when they get here, and things like that. That's besides the point. I do think Iran is a sort of reasonable target. So they want to build nuclear weapons, they want to build bombs, and they have a deep disdain of the West. So it only makes sense that we take them out before they take us out. It's just unfortunate that it only applies to foreign policies and not internal politics. But if they were able to build ICBMs, nuclear warheads, I don't think America would be target number one because Europe and Israel are right there. Which again, it's mostly an Israeli issue. That's not an America issue, unless, of course, America stays in Israel's pocket. The best thing I think we could do is in and out, reduce them to rubble. We annihilate it. We flattened Japan in World War II. I'm not saying we should take the nuclear option, but we definitely should attack them with ferocity and firepower that hasn't been seen since the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If we annihilate them, annihilate their military centers, if there's civilian casualty spillover, that would be unfortunate. We should be annihilating military centers. We should be annihilating their religious leading centers because they're one and the same there. If we take out the Ayatollah, we take out his followers, and we take out all of his military infrastructure within a short period of time, then we can send an ambassador there, we can send an embassy there, we can talk to them about their future in the Middle East. We're pursuing peace and cooperation with Saudi Arabia, which is another generally barbaric nation. They have pseudo-slavery. They practice Sharia law. I don't know about radical Islam, but they do practice Orthodox Islam. Let me say, I don't really care. I know Christ is going to come back a second time, and he's going to have the final say about all that. But if they're willing to be peaceful while we're all here together, then They have their land, we have ours. There's no reason why we can't have the same kind of relationship with Iran. Um, it would be nice if the world was a little more peaceful, if we could have a better exchange with the Middle East. It's a beautiful place. It would be wonderful if we could safely go there on vacation. We could visit them. Uh, I'm not saying we should be one, and I'm not saying we should try to exchange people and live in each other's borders. That would never work. That doesn't work even in today's age and in our plural America. I think that's something that leads society to rot. That's something that damages borders. It damages sovereignty. It damages accountability. Pluralism is going to be the death of the West if we keep that up. Um, they do have that right there. They do have that kind of correct over there. Their iron grip on society and then who can participate in government and whatnot. It's ridiculous that here we let everybody vote, no matter who they are. Everybody has an equal say, from a 30 plus year veteran to Becky, who just turned 18 and is going to community college. They have an equal say in how the government goes. Now, you could argue that we have different votes based on dollar votes, but that only goes so far as lobbyists in Washington are working with millions and billions of dollars. And the average person, even the average super PAC, even the average PAC, can't keep up with that. Um, Back to Iran. We could definitely pursue peace with them. It would be nice if we could actually have an understanding with them. I mean, I personally, like, Saudi Arabia they've basically bought out our golf league over here. I don't watch sports anyway, but I definitely don't watch them now because I don't know. They're I won't support a Muslim nation. I'm a diehard Christian. It's a Judeo-Christian heresy. Islam is a Judeo-Christian heresy. It leads to nothing but barbarity and suffering. I mean, they even have a foothold over in places like Dearborn, Illinois, where they have their own Sharia law districts. They have a Muslim mayor in New York because I guess we never forget means we forgot about 10 years later. I guess it would be 26 years later, but still. That's a lot shorter than never. Um, and then afterwards, Donald Trump, he did say he would support annihilating their navy. Whatever. I mean, we've got big ass bombs. That should be fairly easy for us to do. I do not support regime change. I support wiping out the regime. I support wiping out the Ayatollah, his cronies, and their entire military hierarchy. But after that, it's not our culture. It's not our people. It's not anything we recognize. So we can cooperate, but I don't really care if we have a say in who takes power next. You know, if they start saying "Death to America" again, yeah, go ahead. It's just too easy. We have big bombs. But other than that, why don't we let them govern themselves? I know what Israel's going to want. It's the same thing they want for Palestine. They just want to flatten the place. They want to kill everybody inside of it. Uh, I really do wish we had way less of a relationship with Israel. It's nice to be friendly with them. We've let them infiltrate all of our technology. With Jeffrey Epstein, we've let them collect a lot of intelligence on our politicians, and I personally doubt there's going to be little to no accountability for them going forward. So most of the American political system is going to remain in Israel's pocket for the foreseeable future until the people are ready the people decide to take things back into their own hands. It's unfortunate. It is what it is. We're told not to despair. Christ is going to have the last say in it, and there's a kingdom waiting for us on the other side. And I do firmly believe in that. These kinds of people will not be making it to the other side. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with being at war with Iran. Uh, I think everything we contribute to this war should go towards Israel's 3.6 billion for the next 2 years or 4 years. Um, I'm with Asmongold. I won't be voting for the lesser of two evils, but if there is a politician out there, especially a hard right wing politician, who says that they're ready to cut ties with Israel entirely and stop funding them, stop letting them have dual citizenship when Jews go on Aliyah, I'm all for that. That's actually a really good way to get into the next segment. Talking about getting the migrants out of here, getting the foreign invaders that are here out. I think that dual citizenship should be an institution of the past. It allows for divided loyalties. We have foreign powers who have people that have voting rights on our soil. That's ridiculous. We we have far too many people that can vote as it is. We don't need a citizen of another country coming over here with the right to vote. I don't mind having super high skilled migrants over here to help work. Like Robert Lowe said, it's we should have millions less in this country, and I agree with his stance on Britain. He says there should be a lot more people leaving Britain for the foreseeable future than coming in. I think America needs to be the same way. When we were on mission in South Africa, we had one of the natives over there talking about how he wanted to bring an entire mission group over here. I think it was 10 people for with 10-year visas each. And the only ones that were approved were the two tour guides who would actually be taking people on tours and showing people around. And he looked at me and my wife kind of like expectantly, like he was waiting to hear our opinion. And I had to put my hand on her hand and say, no, it's not our place to say, well, that's good. I don't want low skilled migrants here. I want the H-1Bs gone. Indians are just as insular as these Hasidic communities, as these Orthodox Jewish communities. I want the Minnesotan Somalis gone. They are nothing but a tax drain on Minnesota. They've essentially turned the urban environments there into their own little countries. And which begs the question, what's even going on with that? How come we haven't heard of, all these people being deported, all these people being jailed? There should be major news statements showing that they're being put on planes. Who cares? Put them in El Salvador. They shouldn't be here. They don't have rights to be here. And if they do, this is all a decision. Letting these people stay, letting these people invade, letting these people drain our tax money is a decision. It's a soft, cuckolded, limp-dicked decision where these people should honestly be grateful that we're letting them leave rather than putting them to work like Saudi Arabia does. I do think Saudi Arabia's got that right. You come here illegally, you disturb the peace, you're going to be a laborer, and it's a one chance rule. You should never have came here. You should have never came here and acted that way. You should be working for the rest of your life. You should be working to the bone for the rest of your life. But I understand we're a Western nation. We're a little more civilized than that. So we should be sending them home with the shirt on their back and the shoes on their feet. And like Asmongold says, if they're nice shoes, well, we can give them different ones and we can take those shoes back too. The same thing goes for all the South Americans that have come to my nation. The same thing for the Somalis, same thing for the Chinese and Indian H-1B visas. None of them should be here. China is a consistent thorn in our side. We cannot do business on Chinese soil without them stealing our technology, stealing our businesses, reverse engineering our products. That there should be zero to no relationship with China until they're willing to play ball. And I understand they won't be willing to play ball. So why are we willing to help them succeed? Why are we willing to help them further their agenda, further their society? I understand they're a major rival, and it might seem like it's going to take the tensions off, but they have been seeking revenge ever since the Boxer Rebellion, and ever since the Great Humiliation is what they call it. It is what it is with them. They're going to do everything they can to get ahead on us, and then put the rest of the world behind it. I don't think we should treat them as an outright hostile power, but we do not need to be doing whatever we can to be friends with them. You can have videos of Elizabeth Warren, that jerk off from the Democrat side, who in the 70s was saying that letting China make all our plastic goods was a bad idea. And that's true. We should have never been trying to enrich them. We should have never been outsourcing labor to them. Every job that's not given to an American is a job taken away from an American. And that's one less person that's able to make it. That's one less person able to feed their family, one less person able to afford having a family. But then the government's going to say, oh, why is the population declining? It's not a mystery. I'm 29. And I'm not that smart of a guy. And it does not take a whole lot to see that. It's, I would say that it's a planned decline, but it's more of a managed decline, because I do think there's an element where the people in charge are just too vacant to see these things happening. They're so greedy that they're unable to actually see past that. And I think they understand they're doing something wrong, which is why they never want to testify at Congress, and which is why they always want to talk around issues. But I don't think they have the ability to comprehend just how evil it is that what they're doing. Um, so yeah, there's we haven't seen the thousands or tens of thousands Somalis being deported. I wish that stuff would be televised. It would make great propaganda. It would make great programming. I would love to see them protesting and trying to argue their way around why they should get to steal money and have fake daycares and healthcare centers and leering centers. But I don't think anything's actually happening with that. Uh, Less Somalis, less Jews. I mean, if you've seen any of Tyler Oliveira's videos about these Jewish enclaves, you see the driving there. Uh, you've seen Indians over on the West Coast. There, not that long ago, there was an Indian trucker who was it. He killed three people, and it was one family, or was it three families with his truck? It was something like that. And then you have all these different immigrant groups driving around in like Lexuses, BMWs. They have luxury vehicles, whereas my wife and I can barely afford to have a single vehicle. And that's why are we why are we so willing to help out people that are different just because they're different? It's sickening, and they don't even bring much to the table. Like I said, these people can't drive. They create extra traffic. They create more dangerous traffic. They steal American jobs. They steal financial security. They use it to enrich their nations, which, I mean, if you've seen India, it's a shithole. Um, and the more we deport these people and the more we stop them from coming in here, the lower the cost of living is going to be. The biggest argument you could make is that b- bigger businesses wouldn't want to stay here, so there would be less industrialization. And to which I say, well, that's good. The less industrialization, the more people are forced to rely on their own two hands, their own skills, their own knowledge, which means that American self reliance would make a comeback. I mean, the first few years would be painful, sure. And honestly, we need it. We need a generation where we learn how to be self sufficient again. I think after the Great Depression, we had the New Deal, which was the first encucking of American society, where we tried a major socialist push. And if you look at the history books, that the great or the New Deal wasn't the event that got us out of the Great Depression. World War II is what got us out of the Great Depression. Like it or not, we are a country that runs on war and industry. I don't think we would need to run on war forever, but going back to the war with Iran, we're not going to be able to make money if we're participating in war. We fund war. We build for war. We create weapons. We create technology for war. There's no way we can make the money off of war to enrich our nation, which made us a superpower at the end of World War II, by the way, if we're the ones also using the technology. Vietnam was one of our first great humiliations. We might know how to make the technology, but we don't know how to use it. And then if we are using it, we're not selling it to somebody else. The GWAT was way too long. It was Halliburton. I can't think of all the names right now, but all those big politically aligned weapons manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, they may have gotten rich, but the general American person got poor because we were paying ourselves to build and export these technologies. We weren't being paid by other nations to do it. Um, and in doing so, the Middle East, you could spin that as it was a threat to Western society in general. They're closer to Europe. And since NATO's been founded, Europe has not been kicking in the amount of money that they should be for the defense fund. I think we should be done with NATO. We should be walking away from NATO. By us constantly overspending for NATO and the UK, not just UK, Europe constantly underspending for NATO, they were able to create a surplus, which got them all those social programs, which was great. You know, I thought Europe was the bee's knees in the early 2000s when I was a kid, early 2010s. But then you see them using that surplus to import all these migrants, all these Middle Eastern migrants that don't want to assimilate, that are basically barbarians that are going around raping their women and girls. They're taking up land. They're making the place filthy. And if you consider that they weren't paying into NATO the amount of money they should have been paying into, then you realize technically it might be a some mental gymnastics there, but I don't really think so. The money they saved from not paying into NATO is the money they spent on importing these migrants for cheap labor, and it's sick. We should be walking away from NATO. That shouldn't be something we're a part of anymore. If they're that scared of Russia, they should handle Russia themselves. The Ukraine funding the Ukraine is a blunder. It's a conflict that we're only a part of because Joe Biden's kid was caught doing cocaine over there or some nonsense. He was definitely involved in Ukraine, and that's why we're involved in that war. It's bullshit. You saw how Zelensky came over here and pouted to President Trump and JD Vance in the first few days of the presidency. It's a conflict that we shouldn't be spending more money on. NATO is something we should be done with. There's nothing wrong with being an isolationist nation. We don't even need to be isolationist. I'm not a global politics enjoyer, but we can have relationships with other nations without being intimately involved in them. We don't need to be the world's police. I think it's a retarded idea that we've tried to be the world's police ever since the end of World War II. If you look at both world wars where we were the deciding factor, it's because we were on the outside until things popped off. Granted, the Lusitania was definitely, we burned those people on the altar to Moloch in order to get involved in the war, which I think is wrong. We didn't, and what's the worst that could have happened? There's no way possible that either of the European wars would have actually stretched over to here and affected us in any major way. Hitler spread himself too thin when he invaded Russia. How could he have afforded to send troops across even further than England? I mean, he was having a hard time taking England. How was he going to send troops across the Atlantic and take America? World War One was, a distant relic of the past. I can tell you more about World War II than World War One, but both were a beginning stage for America being involved in the globe, and we should have said, okay, well, that's our thing. We saved the day. We ended the war. Come say hi when you're ready to pay your debts, and then we'll see you guys later. There's no reason why we're trying to maintain this facade of being the world's police. If we can defend our own borders, if we can outpace places like China, which is probably our biggest military rival. You could argue Russia, but they're struggling against Ukraine. They could just level it, but if they were to use a nuke on Ukraine, Russia would be done. So we really don't have much to defend ourselves from. And yeah, China's an economic threat, but then you see how the infrastructure of Africa is doing, and Africa is still falling apart despite all the Chinese money put into it, because either they're not that competent as architects, or they're not that competent at, I don't want to say slave driving, but they're not that competent at forcing the Africans to get into shape and actually maintain their own nation. So there's no need for us to be attempting to play on the world stage right now, especially considering we have homeless issues, we have drug issues, we have insurance issues. Insurance is a scam. If I could trust my government and there wasn't so many damn people in this country, you might even be able to call me a socialist. But you can't trust the government. You can't trust the people in charge, because they're just always trying to rape you and steal, and they have their hand in your pocket trying to take your money, trying to take everything you own. So the less government, the better. Dual citizenship's definitely got to get outlawed. There's no reason that somebody from South Africa, who is going to always care about South Africa more than they care about the United States, has an equal power to vote as I do. A born, raised American citizen, served in the army. There's no reason why an Israeli, or why somebody who's Jewish with a dual citizenship to Israel, has as much of a vote as me. We don't need to be blessing the Eastern Europeans that have taken over the Israeli government and land, because they're not ethnically Jewish. You can go back and watch that Tucker Carlson interview with Mike Huckabee, who he dances around the question exactly how a liberal would dance around a question when Tucker Carlson asks, hey, why don't we just DNA test everybody here to see if they're ancestrally Jewish? Because they're not. The Kazakh tribe, they liked that Judaism didn't have as many rules as Islam, and it was easier to understand than Christianity with its Trinity. So they chose Judaism, and then they realized, oh wait, that means we have an ancestral claim to this land over here. So after they got beaten and bloodied, and these are the Ukrainian Jews right now. The part of the reason why Russia's part of they're the ones that are saying there's Nazis in Russia, so they're forcing the rest of the world to go fight on their behalf. They went over to Israel and they're making land claims. Bibi Netanyahu he's a pseudo prophet, a false prophet in the greatest. He is by and large an atheistic secular Jew, but he uses the word of God to coerce the West and coerce us into helping him and into blessing his nation. He's an antichrist. I'm not going to say the antichrist because many will rise, but he certainly is one of them. And if you're willing to listen to him, then you have no part in the kingdom to come. It's unfortunate and it's a hard truth, and people might disagree with me on that, but to say that you have to bless Israel, and then that means military support while they wipe out the Palestinians, while they want to wipe out the Iranians, it's a deep error. It's not unrepentable, of course, but it's a deep error to believe that we need to support Israel's genocides. Um, let's lighten this up a little bit. WoW Midnight releases on the 2nd. Uh, I cannot wait to see that game fucking die once and for all. But I've been saying that for almost a decade now. I don't know, when did Shadowlands come out? It's about that long. I used to be a diehard WoW player. I played from the time I was like 11 or 12 during the end of Classic all the way through Warlords of Draenor when I was a freshman in community college doing a communications degree in Enfield, Connecticut. I used to be a fucking bleeding heart liberal. Um, but that game's gone way downhill. Now they finally, after 20 years, have released player housing. Final Fantasy 14 did that relatively. I don't know. They may have had it from the time they launched. Old school RuneScape has had it for at least since 2007, and World of Warcraft, just like Bungie, there's a lot of parallels between Blizzard and Bungie. They saw that the game was going downhill, player numbers were going downhill, so they were like, "Oh well, here's something. Here's a feature that everybody's been wanting for a while. So come on, come play again." It's only monetized a little bit because they got to monetize everything because their pay pigs love it. One of my childhood friends has never quit the game. I think he said he did quit it one time for 6 months. I tried the War Within. I think maybe a year ago. I played it for 2 months, and I realized I was playing the same game I was playing back in Shadowlands, same game I had quit back in Legion. It was just Mythic Plus grinding, for the same incrementally better piece of gear. Where if you go look at Classic WoW, and I would never pay to play Classic WoW, not in the state it is. They could if they had released Classic Plus, but even that you got to ignore a whole bunch of stuff. But if they had just left it, you get a piece of gear. It's good for the next several. It's just good forever, or it's at least good for the next. I don't know. I mean, you had pieces from Classic that were good in Burning Crusade. So, but now, instead of getting BIS or near BIS and just being set for the next 2-3 years, you're replacing your stuff every 6 months when they decide to move the story another half inch forward. Just like every mainstream game, every major publisher, they gayified the game. They added DEI, LGBTQ, ESG. They added all those different um, acronyms to it. Uh, Um, you got a one-armed buzz cut. She looks like Deborah Wilson with one arm. I'm surprised they didn't say she was trans. I don't even know her name, but the last thing I saw in the War Within, the day I quit was when they released a cinematic with her. Actually, hold on. Let me share an image with you guys. I was making a video a little while ago, and I'll show you part of the reason why I quit WoW. Let's see. Come on. Oh, because I closed it like an idiot. Let me bring it back up for you. Let me show y'all what this is about. Yeah, that one, and it's the cinematic where and that you see the rainbow blizzard, you see the women with the beards and the tits, and you look at these gargoyle beasts where World of Warcraft was about big sweaty men and orcs fighting each other. You see the monetized housing system. It's just all a bunch of trash, dog shit, trash, goy slop. Honestly, I I have a buddy. I have a buddy I go to seminary with, and the other day he called weed goynip, and I thought that was the funniest thing. We were sitting at the table during Bible study, and he dropped that bomb, and I was beside myself because I had quit smoking weed in like October, right before we went to South Africa. We were going on a mission trip. You can't just bring weed on planes, so I was like, well, done with the goynip. Um, Worth it. Weed's way too expensive. Uh, it's another way to drain your pocket. It's another way to fund all these different gay agendas. You see most people that are in support of marijuana. They actually, I just closed the image, but it's people that look like they work at Blizzard, look like they play that game. Um, just nasty, trashy stuff. It's got its medical uses, sure, but people at large don't need to be smoking it. Alcohol is bad enough. Nicotine's bad enough. There's enough ways for us to die. We don't need to be adding things to the mix. Um, like I said earlier, I play old school RuneScape now. I think it's pretty fun. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of time to play games right now. I'm a seminary student. I'm full time seminary. I'm an auditor for Walmart, so I'm looking to become more fully employed because I only work like 20 hours a week at that job. Uh, I'm not looking to add more video game time to my life. I think it's enough to sit here in front of a screen and talk at y'all. But I mean, I do enjoy doing this. Um, and RuneScape is one of those games you can pick up, put down. Everything you do adds progress. They've never outdated anything in that game. I mean, I'm sure there's things that I'm sure they've power crept a lot of their older content, but the content is still meaningful. I mean, you can look at any number of guides on YouTube about old school RuneScape, and it's a fun little game. I mean, they've got body type A and B, but they haven't overfagified the game, which is it's really nice. Recently started playing Marvel Rivals with my brother. Not necessarily a fan of the Chinese by any stretch of the imagination, but um, yeah, I didn't have to pay for Marvel Rivals. That's the reason I never played Black Myth Wukong because I wasn't going to give a Chinese developer $40 because they're kind of an enemy state. Um, but me and my brother played. I used to really like Overwatch, but I just went through all those different points about Blizzard. They made Tracer a lesbian and Soldier 76 gay within like a year of each other, and I was just like, those were kind of my two mains. What am I gonna do now? Because I'm not gonna go around playing some goofy little gay guy, and I wasn't gonna go play the Karen haired dyke. I wasn't gonna do it because that's just you inserted a message, and by pushing in the message, you pushed out the escapism, the player mindset. I was in the army at the time, and I was it was fun as hell playing a soldier with a rifle. Hit scan. It was really fun, but then it's like, well, all the soldiers I know that are gay are like just terrible with weapons. They're effeminate gay men. They're not like manly guys that know how to shoot a gun. And I was just like, well, this is kind of taking me out of the fantasy of the game. So no more of that. Um, I played Destiny 2 for a long time. For a long time, I had like thousands of hours in that game. When the expansion with the non-binary character with the radial mast and his mentor who killed himself for no reason, but it was necessary. I forget what the expansion name was. The one with Root of Nightmare. I had did the contest mode for Root of Nightmare, and then I solo flawless Trials of Osiris in like the same week, and I was satisfied. I beat the game. I was done. I didn't need to continue. Bungie made like half the cast of characters some form of the rainbow within again a year because there was money in it, and I didn't like being bossed around by all these queers. I'm no like I'm pretty consistent with my attitude and ethic. Uh, if you have no position bossing me around in real life, why would I let you do it in a game? I'm pretty sure there was a rumor that Shaxx was gay, which like he was the Crucible, and then hearing he was either gay or bi or something, I was just like, I was glad Cade was dead because they couldn't retroactively fagify him. Thank God. But then they brought him back, and he was just insufferable. The amount the rainbow vomit they used on that Shahan, the new blueberry tutorial guy. I think he was a fairy, and I was just like, what are we doing here? This is ridiculous. It's just uh, I don't like supporting mostly gay franchises. Like, if you're gonna be gay, like, just hide in your closet. You don't need to be out and proud about it. It's disgusting. Um, but yeah, Marvel Rivals has been a lot of fun. I've been really enjoying that. OSRS has been really cool. My brother's been trying to get me into Escape from Tarkov for the longest. I don't really like PvP too much, but he says the PvE is a lot of fun. It's just, am I really about to go drop $100 on just like a new game? That doesn't really appeal to me. I mean, PUBG was fun and it kind of looks like PUBG, so I've been thinking about it. If it goes on sale again, I'm definitely going to do that. All right, now let's move on to the theology section where we talk a little bit about religion and Christianity because that's what I go to school for. It's what I love. Life is a gift from God. I used to be a dirty little pagan. I have a bunch of Norse tattoos on this arm, and I got like an entire sleeve of like just pagan of Norse idols. I got runes tattooed on me, and then a couple years after that, I got in a few car accidents and I tore my labrum, so I needed to get it reattached. And during that whole process is when I finally listened to the Holy Spirit calling my name, and I said, "Okay, yeah, you know what? You're right. Something's been wrong with my life this whole time." I was researching Kabbalah, Thelema, all these New Age spiritual religion things where you're trying to do everything where you like Christ, but you're not willing to submit yourself to Christianity. Um, so I finally did submit, and my life has gotten immeasurably better since then. I have full use of my arm again. God's given me my strength back. I'm starting to get back into shape. I'm confident enough to start a streaming channel. I've got a beautiful wife. We own a home. I own a truck. We have 4 cats. Trying for kids. Um, Life is a gift from God. I mean, way back when in 1776. I mean, you could argue that the U.S. wasn't founded on as a Christian nation, but on Christian values, which I mean is true. The Enlightenment has been radically damaging for religion. It over secularized religion. It tried to impose too much logic on it. But either way, the United States was founded on freedom of religion, or not freedom of religion. I mean that too, but it was founded on Christian ideals. If you really look at it, America was founded not necessarily for freedom of religion, but it was freedom of Christianity because, as soon as the Reformation started, Catholics and the Protestants just have gone back to back to back. They were killing each other for 200 years before what would be the settlers were like, okay, hold on, why don't we just go somewhere else? Um, I think Catholicism is definitely a little strange with their ultramontanist papisms. I don't believe that the Pope is infallible. I think that's kind of a retard take. I was born Catholic, baptized, confirmed, the whole 9 yards. I have an Anglican buddy, and anytime he wants to bring up apostolic succession, I remind him that I've got more apostolic succession in my left pinky than his entire church does. With their lesbian woman bishop or archbishop, which is just like, before I got back into before I started, being a proud Christian again, that was my biggest hang up, especially about Protestantism. I learned about it in school and I was like, oh, freedom of religion, being able to read the Bible for yourself and like choosing how to worship, that sounds really cool. And then in the late 2010s and early 2020s, you hear about female pastors and female like ministers, and you're just like, ugh, ugh. You don't have to be overtly religious to understand that that's just wrong. I mean, I walked into it, and I go to an ecumenical school, an egalitarian school. I walked into a classroom one day. This rotund black woman. I'm talking with my buddy in that class, and she's like, "Are you a preacher?" I said, "No, not yet, but I'm getting there." And she says, "Oh, is your wife going to preach with you?" And I was like, "No, we believe Paul." And she lost her mind. She went, "What are you talking about? You know, when he said that about Ephesians, that was just because they had a cult of Artemis in there." And I was just like, okay, well, what's to stop a woman from forming another cult of Artemis? I mean, he based the language in creation. Like, you're just picking and choosing, and that kind of just doesn't work on me. You know, I understand you're probably allergic to accountability, and you know that, true as that may be, that's not how we roll. Um, Protestantism. I mean, I'm not like a mainline Protestant. I think if now if I was harsh on the Pope, I'm 10 times worse on mainline Protestants. They've allowed faggotry. They've allowed homosexuality. They've allowed degeneracy, debauchery. They've allowed femininity. They've just allowed themselves to be weakened, kneecapped. They've cucked themselves to the Asherahs and the Baals of this day. Um, they're more concerned about progress and how they look in the greater scheme of progressivism. They care more about their image rather than worshiping the one true God. Going back to Protestantism being able to worship how they want, I was in class just like a week ago, and we were translating 2 Kings 18 from Hebrew to English. I'm taking my focus is in Greek and Hebrew right now, and we were talking about how King Hezekiah went through and cut down all the altars and high places and incense altars, and he crushed Nehushtan and all that throughout Israel during his reign. And then Rab Shakah was like, "Well, aren't those all belonging to the Lord? Aren't those all worship places?" And my professor was like, "Well, they were, but it was kind of like unsanctioned worship. People were just going around worshiping how they wanted. They were doing their own thing." And I was like, "Oh, so that's kind of like Protestantism, isn't it?" Yeah, I'm a Baptist now, so it was just fun prodding, but he didn't really have a good answer for that because it's kind of exactly how it is. I mean, I wouldn't say all Protestant churches are like that. I go to the church I go to because it's solidly scriptural based. But you go to a Methodist church, you go to an Episcopalian church, you see women preaching, you see them preaching on the news, preaching on lyrics. You go to a Pentecostal church, and all they can think about is the Holy Spirit, and they barely acknowledge the rest of the Trinity. It's like, what are we doing here? This isn't Christianity. This is whatever your feelings say. I was in my Greek class, and we're using Bill Mounce's grammar because it's a Zondervan publication, and my school uses Zondervan stuff. And but my professor is a Stanley Porter guy. And these are just names. These are just names, but they two big names in the world of theology. And I was just sitting there. I was like, "Sir, we should be using the Stanley Porter grammar. It is so much better." And he was like, "How do you know that? You've never even read it." I was like, "Yeah, but I go to a Pentecostal charismatic school. I feel like it's better." And he liked that. I know how to poke fun. I know how to rib. Um, I do think America needs to definitely reform the First Amendment. I don't like the idea. I'm okay with religious freedom, but if you've played Skyrim, and you know how the elves were about the 9 versus the 8, they said it was fine to worship Talos in your own home, but don't be a preacher out loud about it. That's how I feel about things like Islam, Judaism, Hindu, Buddhism. I think it's fine if people want to maintain their own personal beliefs and religions and whatever, what have you, but uh, it should definitely be 100% against the rules, against the law to proselytize. It does nothing but fracture and degrade the nation. We've got 50,000 denominations of Christianity to worry about. We don't need anyone else out here. I mean, you read through the Bible, anybody that disobeys God, the land's going to vomit them out. Whatever would have you. I mean, I'm a Christian, so obviously I'm biased, and I'll admit that. But if we're not going to preach Jesus as the Messiah, then eventually our nation is going to fall because we're disobedient scumbags, and that's just what we deserve. It's my cat. I And these nations. I mean, it's not just. I mean, the religious belief is the most important thing, but they bring different cultures. They bring different ideas. They bring different ethos that just do not assimilate into American values. They want They want all the good things of the nation, just like Assyria and Babylon wanted all the good things that Israel had to offer, but they're not willing to actually be a part of. They're not actually willing to turn to Yahwism. I'm changing up my content. My buddy said he would like to watch if I did it like a newscast. So I'm kind of just he said take an hour and just like stream a focus or stream a conscience. So I'm gonna do that. Um, I watched the Tyler Oliveira video about the Jewish invasion of New Jersey, and it kind of put me on one. Um, but yeah, Islam is just like it's a nation of barbarity. They treat their women like dogs. They they're allowed to lie. They have this principle called al-taqiyya, which they believe that they can lie and practice syncretism if it forwards the agenda of Islam. Their prophet was visited by an archangel as well as Satan. He let Satan deceive him. If you read the satanic verses, it's because that involves when he went back to Mecca. He was talking to the people saying, "Yeah, we'll cooperate with the pagans. We'll work with them. You know, it's not that big of an issue." And then the next day he said, "Oh, Satan told me that. He fooled me. We actually got to kill everybody." Um, you how can you speak the word of God if you've got Satan in your heart? And they've got their principle of tawhid, which the utter transcendence of God. But if God is so utterly transcendent, how do you know he's there? I mean, yes, God is transcendent. God is way above the universe, way above creation, but that's why his son Jesus Christ came down to us in the flesh of man, because as well as being God, he also showed that he could be one of us. You know, that way his sacrifice was enough for us to be expiated of our sins from the garden and everything that's happened since then. Uh you've got the Indians with Hindu, where everything is a deity. The microphone I'm speaking into is a deity. The chair I'm sitting on is a deity. It's all worth praying to. The plane they come over on is a deity. It you universalism is not the way. It just doesn't. Pagan religions make sense because it's the way that the peoples of the world tried to rationalize the world around them before the revelation of the Holy Spirit and before Jesus Christ came as the Son of God. Even I spent time as a pagan in my life. These things personifying forces of nature, just it does make sense to a degree, but you learn better. And the nations of the world they've had the opportunity to learn. I mean, I don't know, who knows when the end is going to come. I can actually talk a little bit about that. Not that I know, but I'm writing my term paper on Revelation this semester, on Revelation 20. Blessed is he who has part in the first resurrection. The second death will have no effect on him. Um, the first resurrection being the regeneration experienced at conversion. Some traditions see it at baptism, but when you're accepted into the community of God, when you turn wholeheartedly back to the Lord, when you become a new man in Christ, is when you rid yourself of the death experience back in the garden. If you eat of this fruit, you'll surely die. Adam and Eve, and thus all of their descendants, died in the garden. It was the spiritual death. We are offered spiritual life through Christ, where our bodies still need to die, but will one day be glorified. When we die, we go to wherever we're gonna go. I mean, we'll still go to heaven, detached from our body. We'll go to hell, detached from our body. And then in the first resurrection, or in the second resurrection, that's when we'll all be raised to judgment, whether it be good or bad. And the only way you're going to be accepted, the only way you're going to be judged well, is if you're inside Jesus Christ, because each one of us deserve to die to our sins. Um, the thousand year reign. We're currently in the church age. The the first resurrection has been inaugurated. Congratulations, my man. Are you excited? Okay, here. The here. Let me pull up my source. Let me pull up my. I bet, dude. I got a green screen for my office, and I've switched everything around. I mean, I imagine it's not as cramped as you are, but I have like no leg room anymore. It's crazy in here. The There is going to be a final age called Parousia, when Christ comes back and inaugurates new creation, new heavens, new earth. But the golden age of the church is immediately when he died on the cross to bind the strong man. We're we're living in the golden age of the church while we also experience constant trial and tribulation. Now, I'm open to there being a more intense period at the end of time when you know it when left behind is going to happen. I don't actually believe that we're going to get raptured and brought up, but I do think that things are going to get crazier. More antichrists will rise other than Bibi Netanyahu. Um, More than Joel Osteen. You're going to get worse than that. There's going to be just trial tribulation. But then when Christ returns, everybody's going to be raised to judgment. There's some traditions out there that say there's going to be 1,000 years after that when the perfect believers are living with just regular people. And that just doesn't make sense. There's no scriptural evidence to that. Even reading Revelation 20, Revelation's a weird text because it's an apocalyptic. I could get, what, why not get into the mechanics of it now? Looking at John 5:24-25, Ephesians 2:4-6, Colossians 2:12-13, Matthew 12:29. We've already been talked about, the hour has come and now is when believers will be brought to new life. I'm paraphrasing. Because we've been brought to new life in this life, where it would not make sense if there was. I was reading a book or a paper the other day, trying to argue that at the end of the age, everybody's gonna be raised for 1,000 years to let Satan and all those banished to hell have a second chance at redemption. This is the second chance. Now you get one chance, and you're reading about Lazarus and the poor man, and that just kind of typifies it perfectly. He had he had Moses and the prophets. Why? What is he going to believe if he doesn't believe them? We have Moses, the prophets, Christ, the Holy Spirit, and the apostles. What are we going to believe if we don't believe them? It just doesn't make sense to have another 1,000 years after this. We're living in the symbolic 1,000 years. 1,000 symbolizing complete, not completeness, eternity. This is the last. We're living in the last age before the new heavens and new earth. Let's see. Oh, um, that I take what's called the amillennial stance. There's one more, the one I described with the literal 1,000 years where everybody's kind of just alive and there's perfect believers with demons. Which doesn't make sense. That's called premillennial. And now the last one, which there's not much literature on today, is called the postmillennial interpretation. It says that at the last 1,000 years of this creation will lead into the golden age, where humanity will reach the highest possible high, and at that moment, that's what we're kind of like we're like paving the way for Christ before he comes down, and then Christ is going to come down and actually inaugurate the golden age. But it's hard to find literature on that because that was a major belief of the missionary age from the 1700s to the early 1900s. But after 2 world wars, people kind of got depressed and were like, okay, well, I don't think it's as good as I don't know if humanity is actually capable of doing that. And I happen to agree. Most people in the world are dead to their sins, so it wouldn't make sense that we would be able to create anything perfect without the only perfect man that ever walked the earth. Um, let's see. That's kind of my TED talk on theology and religion. That's me going over my paper. Talking about it out loud helps me make sure it makes sense, and it does. The premillennial view, where there's a literal 1,000 years at the end of time, just doesn't make sense. I mean, and you got to consider that Revelation is super symbolic. It's super high in imagery, metaphor. and not necessarily literal, where there are some literal elements, but then, well, I can look at it and I can tell you exactly what I'm thinking. Um, Revelation 19 details the battle of Gog Magog at the end of Earth, at the end of the world, when the forces of Satan rise up and holy fire comes from the heavens to swallow them. See, which is a revelation, not a revelation. It's a reference back to Ezekiel 37 to 39. One day, and one day the armies of the, or you will be tempted to rise up against Israel. And it's not that they're not tempted because they're bigger and badder. They're tempted because they haven't been redeemed. Um, After these things, I heard something like a loud voice in heaven saying, "After what things? After the coming of the Lamb, I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it, oh, is called faithful and true, and in righteousness he judges and wages war." What war? I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him who sat on his horse and against his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed sign in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped in his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, and the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse. Then, so now I got to go back to the Greek and I got to go reference some of the books I read, but a lot of them, and it makes more sense while I'm reading it because this is a lot to try to go over. That last part, and the beast was seized, and the rest were killed with the sword. Now is supposed to be a flashback from. Yeah, and you know what? It actually, after these things, I heard something like a loud voice of a great multitude in heaven saying, "After these things, what things? This battle." So that means Revelation 20 picks back up after these things. Then, after these things, then I saw an angel coming down from heaven. Okay, and he took hold of the dragon. See, this is a recap back to the beginning of the battle. It still bends my brain, but it makes way more sense to read it like that than it does to, okay, so there's a battle. Okay, that's done. Okay, then Christ comes back down. It just, reading it like that just doesn't historically make sense. Um but that's this segment of tonight's stream. I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to go use the bathroom, get some water, and then when I come back, I'm going to do some scripture reading. I haven't decided what books. I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Okay, that's helpful. I think we're going to read some Isaiah. Isaiah sounds good. I'm going to start on Isaiah 1 and we'll see how far we can get tonight. I will be right back.